the whole premise of this video was that every single bank now is starting to tap into crypto. This is through stablecoins. It's through tapping into specific public blockchains for stablecoin issuance. And it's just overall a clear confirmation from every single major bank that, yeah, we are moving on chain. Yes, we are innovating. Yes, we are essentially adapting or we will die. This is the new technology shift that's happening right in front of us. And most people are not aware of this. Most crypto participants are also getting to the point where they are turning a blind eye to all of this because price action. And over the years, you've probably heard that price action is a distraction. It definitely is. However, there is still also a lot of concerns when we start to see projects, going belly up. But for the most part, the main thing that I was putting a spotlight on in that video was that we have these legitimate projects in the space that have been around for years and years now. And they're actually collaborating with some very big players. And big players are also tapping into some of these networks, like, for example, the XRP Ledger and even Hedera. But regardless of that, the main thing that I'm looking at here is that, yes, US banks are now quietly preparing for an on-chain future. And if we're looking into the key takeaways here, we have US banks are prioritizing tokenized versions of familiar products, including deposits, funds, and custody, rather than launching new crypto native assets. Most on-chain bank activity is taking place in wholesale payment settlement and infrastructure, largely out of public view. We do know that JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon recently said that they settled trillions of dollars in one day on a blockchain. Now, that will most likely be a private blockchain because that amount of demand would significantly rise the value of the underlying gas token. But that's also a clear view in the fact that they're trialing this technology. They are planning around this technology. And, eventually that type of demand will hit public blockchains as well. Now we have regulators are increasingly allowing crypto related banking activities, but only within tightly supervised and risk managed frameworks. Public blockchains such as Ethereum are being tested by major banks, but exclusively through controlled and compliant product structures. US banks are not racing to issue speculative crypto products. Instead, they are methodically rebuilding core financial plumbing, including payments, deposits, custody, and fund administration, so these services can operate on distributed ledgers. And yeah, we're at that point in time now where the big banks are no longer telling us, hey, crypto's a scam, stay away from crypto. No, now they're at the point of they no longer can avoid crypto. They need to tap in. They need to start innovating and utilizing this tech because they know if they soon don't, they will simply be replaced. Now, looking into this, we also just got the green light from the OCC on the 9th. This has enabled a lot of what we are seeing within the banking space. And during this time, we've also been seeing a lot of big banks like PNC tapping into Coinbase. Citi was another one that tapped into Coinbase Institutional as well. There's been a few big names jumping in to Coinbase Institutional. Now, on top of that, JP Morgan, if we're going back to this, right, we do know that JP Morgan did launch their tokenized money market fund called Money. That is on Ethereum. They do highlight that down here. Yes, we know that JP Morgan has been working with Ethereum forever now. They originally were utilizing it in the private sense. They were utilizing it for Kinexus, which was originally Onyx. And, that has shifted over the years. But, we do know that at this point, they're now starting to innovate using the public Ethereum blockchain, no longer the private side. And I think that that's something very important to focus on because what that's telling us is that these big banks know that the private blockchain side of, this tech, it's a walled garden, which means it's not going to work as efficient. There's going to be, bottlenecks, and it's going to provide even more friction. So the best way to innovate is through public blockchains. And we've heard this, throughout all of 2025 from even BlackRock and other major players saying that public blockchains are actually the best way of going about this. And I think that this announcement with JP Morgan is clear confirmation of that. But on top of JP Morgan launching this tokenized money market fund, we do know that JP Morgan is now considering offering cryptocurrency trading to its institutional clients as large banks around the world deepen their involvement in the asset class. And yeah, it's happening faster than, most people expected, but this is exactly how it works, right? You have one big player do, something with this technology, and then all of a sudden they all follow through. So the fact that JP Morgan is doing all of this tells me that going into 2026, we're probably going to see a lot more players doing just this. Now, Bank of America. Bank of America says its wealth management clients should start getting some crypto exposure in their portfolios. This was on December 2nd. This was the full statement from Bank of America. This is one of the largest in the country. More than $2 trillion, by the way, announced that it will allow advisors to allocate 1 to 4% to Bitcoin starting in January. Now, this is something to look forward to going into 2026. I feel as if most of the price action is going to stay pretty stable, or we might just chop a little bit more into the beginning of 2026. I mentioned this previously as well. And then after some of these announcements take place, like this one, we're probably going to start seeing an uptrend form. But the main focus here is that all of these big banks are now opening the doors to crypto in a huge way. And it's extremely important to focus on this because it's showing the clear shift. Now, we also just heard from Michael Saylor. Now, I hate using Michael Saylor. However, we do have US banks have officially flipped. In the last 12 months, giants like Citi, JPM, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Vanguard turned pro-crypto. Now, 8 of America's top 10 banks are offering crypto-backed lending. Check it out.
In the world to embrace crypto, to embrace Bitcoin in 4 to 8 years would be fast. What you see here is it's happening much faster. What we've seen is BNY Mellon, PNC Bank, Citibank, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Vanguard, all of these have flipped from a hostile, negative, or skeptical view to a positive view in the last 12 months, right? We have announcements. Schwab is going to custody Bitcoin and extend credit against crypto assets early next year. Citi is doing the same thing. It used to be, I couldn't get a loan against Bitcoin from any major bank, and now if I counted the top 10 banks in the United States, 8 of them are actually engaged in crypto lending, and they've all flipped their stance in the last 6 months.
So yeah, listen, we are witnessing every single bank flipping on crypto, and it's not just in the sense of offering crypto-based trading. We're also now starting to see them launching crypto-based products, stablecoins, tokenized money market funds, and so much more. And it's only the beginning. We also have over here from Raoul Pal, Real Vision CEO Raoul Pal says once the Clarity Act is passed, all the banks will start building out their crypto rails for everything. Now, I do agree with this statement, especially considering the fact that if we're thinking logically about what's been holding banks back from crypto, it's clear guidelines. So with Clarity, this will, put everything into overdrive when it comes back to XRP, when it comes back to any utility-based project. This is going to really put everything into perspective around just how big some of these projects can actually be. And we're also going to see clear confirmation of what network these big banks trust the most. Now listen closely to this video clip.
From when I first got into the space, we said we were going to front run Wall Street. That was 2013. We've always said it, and here they are. When I've been speaking to the sovereign wealth funds here this week, and they've all got crypto in their books now.
And they're openly talking about their allocations.
And not only that, but the Treasury Secretary of the United States, who was an ex-macro hedge fund manager, friend of mine, he openly talks about how important it is. We've got Donald Trump talking about it. We've got everybody talking about it. We've got every financial institution building on stablecoin rails. We've got once the Clarity Act is passed, then all of the banks will start building out their crypto rails for everything. If you speak to everybody, the banks need the clarity. The asset managers need the clarity. The corporations need the clarity. Everyone needs the clarity of the Clarity Act. Once you get it, it's the green light. They're all waiting for what exactly is which things are securities, which are not, how does it all work? And once you've got it, we've got a roadmap. And everybody wants to go. Everybody wants to build on these rails, particularly the financial system, because it's so efficient and so fast to do things that they're incentivized to do.
So yeah, I mean, listen, these banks are extremely eager to tap in. We already know that some banks are already starting to tap in and test a few things, like US Bank. They chose Stellar recently to test its own stablecoin. That was back at the end of November. I mean, listen, this is just the beginning of most of this, right? Like, if we're listening to what's happening here around these massive institutional players, these major banks, it's clear that they want to move on chain. They are already starting to test a few things, trial a few things. We know that SoFi recently rolled out their US dollar stablecoin. It's issued by a bank subsidiary. Again, these types of announcements are going to become so common going forward. And don't forget that back in October, we know that major banks were already exploring issuing stablecoins pegged to the G7 currencies. And these included massive banks, including US, UK, Swiss, Japanese, and Canadian lenders. And some of these banks, I mean, we're talking about Bank of America here, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, UBS, and so many other ones, including even Citi, MUFG, Barclays, TD Bank, Santander, BNP Paribas. I mean, it's crazy to look at these names, and it's very easy to think like, all right, well, they're launching their own stablecoin, so this means that all of these public blockchains are useless, and any stablecoin that's launched on these public blockchains are going to fail. No, in fact, the way that I look at this is all of these banks are now starting to flip into all right, well, that's it. Stablecoins. We need to have a stablecoin. We see the value here. Let's work on a stablecoin. Let's get this going. And it also shows us clearly that there's going to be more initiatives like this. And also all of the banks that are tied back to this initiative will most likely tokenize their own deposits as well and have their own, tokenized deposit token. So you're looking at one of the biggest shifts around our entire financial system over the last roughly 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years. And this is going to reshape finance for the next 100 plus years. So, I mean, looking at what's happening here, it's pretty clear. Once we get that Clarity Act passed, this space is going to grow significantly, and it's going to open up a ton of new avenues to success. Mainly, we look at the institutional side. Big banks are going to get that big green light that they've been waiting for forever. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video.